What's good? Eric here checking in. It is August 4th, 2013. It is a Sunday. I'm actually heading to an engagement of all things. It should be good. Uh, how to look. Shirt's a little bit tight. It's actually my brother's. But yeah, a couple things I want to talk about right now are I'm losing my train of thought, but there's a few things that have been on my mind lately. One of them is this whole notion of perception and the whole universe and multiverse and time. So the first thing is, does time really exist unless we perceive it? And if so, what is time unless we perceive it? To me, time, I kind of see time as a fabric in which change takes place. So if something is changing, if something is moving, even if it's not, if everything is still and nothing is changing, like even if everything is moving, holding still, there's degradation happening. There's electrons and I believe, I forget what it is, but atomic deterioration. I don't remember the exact term for it, but even that takes place if everything else is still. All things constant, even that will take place. Uh, Even a picture will fade over time and decrease. I don't really know where I'm going with this, but either way, the concept of time is, I think it's kind of a man-made concept to kind of observe the change that we go through, and I don't know. That's just my take on it. Another thing that's been prevalent in my thoughts actually is group dynamics and the impact that group geometry has on the situation. So, take for instance, if you decide to say you're in a group of four, and there's two girls and two guys. Depending on how they decide to seat themselves at a table, the conversation will flow differently, I think. I mean, there's no way of really knowing that unless like we test it, and even then the testing is going to be off because no 2 days are the same, and you never really start the day the same as you did before. So like each each action is a consequence of its uh, preceding action, or of its predecessor. Does that make sense? So like, just like, I don't know, me deciding to wear these shades could somehow alter the. Oh, let's take for instance. I remember there was a time, actually just not too long ago, I was having lunch uh, at a place called Hemingway's on the Strip, and for that day, whatever particular, I normally don't wear shades at the beach, but that day I decided to wear them, and I decided to wear them like while I was eating in the restaurant, and somebody footed the bill for me, and the exact words they said to the waitress was, "See that cute guy with the glasses? Yeah, the one right there." And he pointed at me, and yeah. So had I decided not to wear the shades, it could have been completely different. I might not have gotten a free meal out of that. Anyways, that's just one thing, and perhaps the way I was sitting, like my seating changed that. I chose to sit in that spot, and that had a direct impact on the outcome of that day. And that day probably had a direct outcome on the events of this day. Something could have happened that day. So like, something could happen today that shapes tomorrow. It's either way. I don't like to think of it as time being linear, but it does have linear properties. Meaning like the past determines the present, which determines the future. If that makes any sense. If that holds any values. Anyways, so that kind of plays on the whole group geometry thing, and I think geometry plays a huge role in everything we have. So even in our interactions with people, like a simple yet overlooked geometry is your hand placement when you go to get a handshake from someone. It's supposed to be like this, and like apparently I read an article the other day that people who think who are arrogant and think highly of themselves will place their hand like this, so as to place their hand over top of yours, and that's kind of a sign of dominance, I could say, but like not even dominance. I don't know. It's I guess yeah, you could call it dominance. At its simplest, purest form, it's dominance. So it's just crazy to me how just subtle things like that can have an impact on our environment and in our interactions. Even actually, it's actually very prevalent in our interactions, our geometry. I mean, the way that you contort your eyebrows or like lips determines if you're happy or sad. I mean, I don't know. That's just a common notion and of perception now that we have, and I don't know. It just plays a huge role, and I've noticed that like group dynamics will vary a lot. Like I've noticed that if it's very weird. It's very crazy actually. Like I've also noticed that if you're in a car, uh, the environment is very dynamic. Say you have 4 people in a car, the environment is very dynamic in the sense that if someone else gets shotgun, the conversation will take a completely different tone and event of things. Like you can kind of perceive it. Next time you are sitting in a car with 4 people or 4 of your buddies, take note of who's sitting where, and then the next time, well, this is also another interesting fact. When we're observing something, that just our observing that changes the outcome. This was prevalent in the double slit experiments that were conducted a while ago. I don't remember the exact details of it, but what happened was they watched light particles and they found that light particles behave as particles, but actually light particles behave as waves. And then when they decided to put a camera watching the particles exit the first slit, exit the slit, the particles took on the behavior of a particle rather than a wave. And yeah, it's just prevalent in that our observation, our intent to see. There's that word again, intent. Intent is a very broad spectrum word. It can mean anything. To me, it just means directing your energy or focus. But like that minute intent could change the complete outcome of things. It's very okay. So back to the situation. If you are one of the 4 people and you're attempting to observe the dynamic and the group dynamic and the event of things, you doing that inevitably changes things because your intent is on seeing the event, and people won't really pick up on it, but subtly and subconsciously the behavior will change because of that. It's I don't know what the word for it is, but it's the principle that when you're being observed, you can tell, and while you're being observed, you will change your behavior. I mean, we do it, we as people do it, and we are conscious beings, but who's to say that that same law or rule doesn't really apply to anything else? I mean, I honestly don't care about what people think of me, but I can still say that I do change my behavior based on who's watching me. It's human nature to that. I am human, after all. I mean, I'm not above that, so I mean, I still do what I want. I won't change who I am, but it still does play a small, even if it's an insignificant role, it still plays a role in that. Either way, thing I wanted to say is group dynamics, yeah, geometry. What's interesting is plant geometry. I've already mentioned that. Oh, see this one long strand? People thought it was bullshit, but this strand used to grow this way a little bit, and what I've been doing is every day I will come here and I'll touch it and I will say grow upwards, and I will direct my intent towards that branch. Anyways, I'm running out of time now, so that's it for now. We'll touch on it later. Peace.